Thank you for having me, and good afternoon. My name is Regan. I'm the president of the Transportation Trades Department of the AFL-CIO. TTD consists of 37 unions across every mode of transportation, representing millions of frontline workers throughout that run America's transportation network. Our unions represent the totality of rail labor, including both passenger and freight rail workers, such as the engineers and conductors that drive and operate passenger and freight trains. Today, I'd speak collectively on behalf of those 37 unions and their workers. I'm pleased to join the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen and Smart Transportation Division to testify on this vital issue. BLET and Smart TD are two of the 13 rail unions affiliated with TTD, and we fully support their positions on crew size. Additionally, I'm honored to be joined in support of two-person crews by thousands upon thousands of individual rail workers who have submitted personal comments into the docket to describe in detail why two people are needed to operate a train. These workers are the ones whose voices we are here to amplify today. Rail workers experience the demands and risks of the job daily, and we need to listen to them when they tell us what they need to operate a train safely. TTD welcomes this public hearing and the Federal Railroad Administration's proposed rule to require a minimum of 2 crew members on most passenger, freight and passenger rail trains and establish minimum requirements for the location of crew members on a moving train to promote safe and effective teamwork. We applaud Administrator Bose's leadership on this issue and urge the FRA to finalize the strongest rule as soon as possible. This proposed rule acknowledges that crew size is fundamentally a safety issue and that two-person crews are inherently necessary to ensure the safe operation of our freight rail and passenger systems. By creating a federal standard across the industry, the FRA can address the significant safety concerns presented by railroads operating with single-person crews. While FRA has been considering action on crew size for almost 10 years now, trends from the last few years in the rail industry have only heightened the need for strong, swift action by this agency. Since 2015, the Class 1 freight railroads have introduced a new operating model known as precision scheduled railroading, or PSR. In my role as president of TTD, I deal with many different industries and companies. The railroad's actions through PSR are some of the most reckless and dangerous that I've seen in my career. And as an aside, I spent the morning at a transit workforce conference with both employers and unions and rank and file workers, where the collective mood was, how do we grow the workforce in public transit? How do we expand service? And how do we improve our overall operations to better serve the public? So I find it very ironic that after having that kumbaya moment with everyone in a certain industry, I'm here to try to defend the fact that we need 2 people on every crew, and that we need to have, that we're defending the fact that, or protecting the fact that the railroads can't further reduce crew size, especially at a time when service is so poor. The PSR model exists solely to squeeze every last nickel and dime out of the industry. It exclusively serves the short-term benefit of the railroad shareholders at the expense of not just their workers, but also the very customers they are supposed to be serving. The PSR model has allowed Class 1 railroads to achieve record profits, more than $146 billion since 2015. To the detriment of those workers, rail shippers, and consumers. In nominal terms, these profits are even more than what the railroads made at the height of the robber baron days of the 19th century. To achieve these profits for their shareholders' benefit, this business model has stripped railroads of their human and physical capital. Since 2015, these railroads have laid off 45,000 workers, which is equivalent of roughly 30% of the total freight rail workforce. Railroads may want us to believe that these workers were redundant, but it has become clear that the massive reductions of workforce are simply about cutting costs, even if those costs result in the degradation of safety and service. The railroads may say they care about safety, but that is hollow rhetoric. They care about money. The railroad workers who remain have been forced to do more with less. They are faced with discipline or dismissal if they refuse to comply, and the consequence of these choices are no longer hypothetical. Carriers are also compensating for reduced staffing by requiring remaining employees to perform work outside of their craft, in addition to fulfilling their regular duties. At best, this may involve employees performing tasks with which they are not experienced. At worst, employees may be forced to do work for which they're not qualified. Furthermore, rather than maintaining appropriate staffing levels, carriers are mandating overtime for workers who are already stretched thin and penalizing workers who refuse to come to work when they are sick. In an industry where fatigue is a constant risk factor, exposing employees to additional fatigue by asking them to work longer, faster, or perform multiple jobs, especially while sick, is a recipe for disaster. The FRA's own safety data shows that since 2009, the number of railroad accidents and incidents reported to the FRA has not meaningfully declined. Derailments, fatalities, and collisions all increased in the years leading up to the pandemic. Given the notorious pressure that railroads put on their workers to prevent them from reporting incidents to the FRA, we suspect that these accidents and incidents are severely undercounted, especially during the pandemic when safety risks have been much higher and normal government functions, including safety inspections, were curtailed. The bottom line is that PSR prioritizes short-term profits over the long-term health and safety of our freight rail system. Between reports from frontline employees at the FRA's own data and the FRA's own data, it is clear that PSR puts rail workers and the public at a real and unacceptable safety risk. The railroad's implementation of PSR clearly demonstrates they are prioritizing profits above safety, no matter the cost. In the US, a freight train can weigh up to 65,000 tons, average over a mile long, and contain hazardous materials like the 2.2 million carloads of chemicals the railroads transported in 2021. Class 1 railroads are now running trains up to 5 miles long. It is absurd to argue that such a massive piece of equipment can be safely operated by one individual, given the many tasks for which at least 2 people are needed. Not to mention the plethora of vital FRA regulations and railroad operating rules that must be followed while operating the train. Perhaps that is why FAA safety regulations are written under the assumption that at least 2 crew members will operate freight and passenger trains. While 2-person crews are currently the norm on US freight railroads, crew size is often an issue that the railroads like to determine only during the collective bargaining process, not by government mandate. That has certainly been the case during this last round of collective bargaining negotiations, where the Class 1 railroads wanted to put this issue on the table. The safety of rail workers, our communities, and the country's rail system should not be bartered at the bargaining table. It should be a fundamental safety regulation. An issue like crew size should not be open for negotiation, and it should not be something for which unions have to give something else up, like wages, in order to achieve. Additionally, smaller non-union railroads can put 1-person crews out on the tracks, not only jeopardizing safety, but also setting a dangerous competitive trend that larger railroads will seek to follow. The railroads talked this morning about the need to have flexibility to address the severe quality of life issues that the railroads today that is making it hard to retain and grow their workforce. We agree that the railroads need to address those quality of life issues and that they are negatively affecting existing rail workers and deteriorating the attractiveness of becoming a rail worker. Quality of life was one of the top things that rail unions I represented asked for during the bargaining session in recent rounds. The railroads simply refused. These quality of life issues are of the railroad's own making. They were the ones who decided to cut their workforce by 30% and force the remaining railroad workers to work massive amounts of overtime. The railroads can bargain with unions at any other time over these quality of life issues. In fact, we would welcome the engagement. The proposed 2-person crew mandate does not prevent the railroads from at any time addressing these issues that have been caused by their own decisions. Having 2 crew members on a train provides the safety net needed to prevent errors that could jeopardize safety, while also helping ensure train operations comply with important regulations. But second crew members offer more than just passive redundancy. Operating a train is a complex and demanding job that calls on both crew members to work as a team and undertake a variety of important tasks, often simultaneously, to ensure trains run smoothly and safely. For example, a conductor's responsibilities include managing the train consists, coordinating with the locomotive engineer for safe and efficient en route operation, interacting with dispatchers, roadway workers, and others outside the cab, and dealing with exceptional situations like mechanical problems. As the FRA also knows, fatigue continues to plague the rail industry. Employer-mandated long shifts and unpredictable work schedules create a fatigued workforce that has a direct and negative impact on safety. A second crew member helps both employees stay alert and provides an essential backstop to prevent the most costly mistakes that can occur when chronic fatigue affects memory or judgment. Additionally, when emergencies do occur, having 2 crew members is vital, since the ability of a lone crew member to investigate or respond to a situation is nearly impossible. If a train being operated by a single crew member were to encounter emergency situations such as a highway crossing collision with an automobile, a release of hazardous materials, or a mechanical problem, that crew member could not leave the engine idling in order to investigate the issue. Those emergency response needs would have to wait until another crew member could arrive from many miles away. Should a train break down and block a highway crossing, a second crew member would be needed to quickly disconnect the train to unblock that crossing. Expecting one crew member to execute every required task while anticipating all possible operating scenarios is an unacceptable risk and beyond irresponsible. Having a second crew member physically on the train in the event of an emergency quite literally could be the difference between life or death. The additional capacity of a second crew member could also minimize property and environmental damage to surrounding communities. The FRA's recount of events of the December 2013 Castleton, North Dakota incident illustrates how multiple crew members working together to communicate and coordinate with emergency responders can help save lives and reduce destruction. As president of TTD, I've seen how other transportation sectors require at least 2 crew members to ensure necessary redundancy and safety in the event of an incident. In the aviation sector, commercial passenger flights have for decades had at least 2 pilots in the cockpit in case one pilot becomes incapacitated. Most large cargo flights have at least 2 pilots as well for that very reason. In the maritime industry, most large cargo and passenger vessels have multiple crew members in order to handle the complex tasks needed to operate such vessels and respond to emergencies. On ocean-going vessels, for example, federal law requires that 2 crew members must be certified as GMDSS radio operators, which is the Maritime Global Distress System, so that there is redundancy in responding to emergencies should one arise. Unfortunately, most transportation safety laws in our country's history have come after incidents that have killed people. We have, in the aviation labor world, have at times referred to the Federal Aviation Administration as the tombstone industry, because the major regulations that have come into place often happen after a major catastrophic incident, where the regulations are written in blood. For example, the aviation maritime sector has implemented those crew requirements in response to such tragedies. We cannot wait for another tragedy in the rail industry before we implement common sense regulations. We don't want to look backwards and be reminded that we could have done something to prevent a tragedy. In fact, we sadly learned this lesson the hard way in 2013 in Quebec, Canada, when a one-way train carrying 72 cars of crude oil killed 47 people and demolished the town of Lac-Mégantic. The incident occurred after a crew member, working alone, parked the train uphill from the town for the night. Unmanned, the train rolled back down the track and exploded. This devastating, potentially preventable incident is a stark reminder of the safety challenges that face this industry and the need for a federal mandate of this nature. We hear a lot from railroads about the wonders of technology and how technology will solve all of our problems, including being able to drive trains. The bottom line is that technology, including positive train control, is not a substitute for well-qualified human beings who have knowledge and expertise, as well as and have seen numerous times, as we have seen numerous times in transportation incidents. High-profile transportation incidents such as the Lac-Mégantic derailment or the recent Boeing MAX plane crashes that resulted tragically in multiple deaths and near tragedies like the Miracle on the Hudson, where Captain Sullenberger's heroic action saved that plane, show that the best and most effective way to ensure transportation safety is having multiple crew members who are experienced and well qualified to operate that particular mode of transportation. The MCAS technology Boeing used, in fact, made the Boeing MAX plane crashes more likely, not less, and represents an unfortunate cautionary tale on substituting technology for trained human beings. Railroads also claim they need to retain the ability to move to one-person crews because they are facing a near-term existential threat from automated trucking. This claim is nonsense. First, there are no automated trucks on the market today. You could not purchase one no matter how much money you have. And secondly, most experts in automated driving technology say that it will take decades for the technology to be viable, if it ever does. In fact, there were 2 professors from Carnegie Mellon University at the conference I was at this morning who talked about how they don't see a possible scenario where fully automated large vehicles, including buses and trucks, could operate on the roads given the current conditions. They think the entire focus needs to be focusing on how to make it safer for a human operator and give them more tools in order to make adapt technology in order to empower workers to do things better. After the idea that's not viable, if you want to see how well, or in this case, very poorly automated driving technology is going, go look at Elon Musk and Tesla. Tesla's so-called full self-driving beta system is facing multiple investigations from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration because it has killed and injured several people. Automated trucking technology is not a near-term threat to railroads, if it will in fact ever be one. There's another point I want to make about the trucking industry. Railroads say that they cannot afford to implement these basic fundamental safety measures because of existing competition from truckers. TTD deals with the trucking industry on a daily basis, and we strongly agree that the trucking industry needs to improve their labor and safety standards. And we fight for those needed improvements every single day. But that should not be an excuse to degrade safety and working conditions on the railroads. Nobody wins if we engage in a race to the bottom on labor and safety standards in the name of cost cutting. This is the whole reason we have laws and regulations in the first place. Given the railroad's record profits and the fact that automated trucking is nowhere close to being a reality, if ever, the idea that railroads won't be able to compete with the trucking industry if they are required to have 2 crew members, which is the standard now, is ridiculous. I'm confident that railroads will be able to continue to make robust profits if crew size rulemaking is finalized. Furthermore, we have been asking the railroads for years to make the necessary investments in their workforce and infrastructure to be able to grow their market share, to expand. We want to have more cargo moved by rail. It's better for the country, it's better for our economy, but unfortunately the railroads have instead decided to double down the PSR business model, which again prioritizes cost cutting and making the most money instead of providing good service to customers and growing their businesses. The railroads are losing market share today because of their own decisions over the past 7 years. And by the way, this has greatly reduced service, but this is a shame not only for the workers that operate the railroads, the customers who are suffering, but also frankly for the environment, where it's a much more environmental friendly way to move rail or move cargo long haul than through the trucking industry. In conclusion, rail operations are relatively safe today because trains are operated by 2-person crews and the hard work and expertise of these crews and other rail workers. I find it incredibly troubling that instead of recognizing this fact, the railroads are advocating a policy that would give them the ability to downsize this workforce and expose workers and communities to avoidable safety risks in our freight network. Moving from 2-person crew operations to 1-person crew operations is like, as Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg once famously said, throwing away your umbrella in a rainstorm because you're not getting wet. Not everything in this proposed rule is perfect. In the coming days, TTD will file comments that suggest ways to improve the proposed rule. But it is imperative that the FRA finalize the strongest possible rule as quickly as possible so that we can protect rail workers, communities, and this country from the accidents and incidents that would inevitably happen if we move to 1-person crew operations. The FRA was unable to finalize this proposed rule back in 2016, and we cannot repeat that mistake today. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.